Yo, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome. This is the pre-playoffs recap. It's been so exciting just working on the project of NACAL this year, alongside Kevin and the team. And here we go, the different topics we're going to be covering. We got ourselves the group's results. We're going to be covering the seeds. So each team coming in, seeding however they're seeding, coming out of their groups. We're looking at the top 8 favorite teams to win the entire playoffs. We're going to look at the top 5 underdogs that are just a bit shy of being within that top 8 that could definitely ruffle the feathers of the top 8. And then we're going to go into a little Q&A section where we talk a little bit about the responses I got to some questions I threw the way of the top 8 expected teams. So without further ado, let's jump into things. Let's touch on the groups. So starting off with the groups, we have Group A. So with Group A, it was ADS Gaming up against Coalition, Mafia, Outliers, and Punish Gaming. And ADS Gaming came out on top, winning each and every matchup that they had in front of them. And they did it without really much concern. They were able to take down their opponents quite easily, except for the matches that you see on the stat sheet right there of the Mafia Outliers. So it's an interesting little tidbit to keep in our heads when it comes to playoff time is, does this Mafia Outliers side have some sort of plan, or could they maybe look to upset other teams in the playoffs? But one big question that you do throw the way of the Outliers is, how did they not come away with second in their group when they're able to perform that well against this side of ADS Gaming who topped their group? Well, the question remains to them is just, maybe it's about closing out. Maybe it's about making sure that they can clutch up, because right now they're missing that clutch factor. They didn't clutch up their matches that they should have won against Coalition, and we have a draw where they didn't even get to play a match against Coalition that would have maybe decided on whether or not they were that second place team or the third place team. So cold feet happened in that group when it came to Coalition and the side of Mafia Outliers. But all in all, the Mafia Outliers come third. They escape having to be fourth because Punish Gaming just didn't have any gas in the tank throughout the entirety of the group stage. So you guys see what sort of happened. You guys see the grand picture there. ADS Gaming looking really strong coming out of their Group A. Great performances there, but they do, however, look beatable. There are definitely chinks in the armor that we'll be touching on later on, as we expect them to maybe get shooken up by some other teams in the first seed. And so somebody just redeemed wear shades, so I gotta wear some shades, guys, while I go over this. So let's cover this with some shades on. So giving you guys a bit of a look down at the Group B and how Group B went. So with Group B, we got Dynasty Gaming coming out on top, and this was a very scrappy group. When I say scrappy, I mean the final standings in this group, third, second, first, it all was relatively decided within the last week of matches. So as you guys are going to see there on screen, you got some wins, some losses, and teams in this group traded wins and losses with each other. You got teams in the first seed trading wins and losses with a third seed in this group, in the second seed. So it's a little bit the first seed traded wins and losses with the second seed in this group. My apologies, I read that one a little bit wrong on my notes, but ultimately you're looking at a interesting sort of finish to that group. You're not looking too what's the word I'm looking for here, too satisfied if you are Dynasty Gaming with your performance in groups. And we'll obviously touch a little bit on how we expect them to perform going into playoffs a little bit later. We'll touch on, sort of after I ask them some questions about their performances, how they might perform, how they might expect themselves to perform come playoff time, and how they might not have, showed all their hands, all their cards within the first group stage appearances that they've had. So now moving into the next group, we have ourselves with Group C coming up next here. And Group C, another group that had a one-sided showing. This time around, Ragers Esports were the side that showed up massively. They got themselves a big, no-loss, undefeated record. They had one of the strongest showings out of all the teams. I think they were a top 4, if not top. I think they're within the top 8 for sure, from my recollection. And it goes without saying, you look at it, they have 2 wins on their belt that were dropping 2 maps. They dropped 4 maps in total throughout their 6 matches, and wonderful work overall from them to, come out of this with an 18-4 record, topping their group. And another Mafia team has made it through into the playoffs. This one coming in the second seed. This is the Mafia Reliviers, or I'm gonna have to really work on how I say this one. Reliviers. We will work on that one, but so far they look like an interesting team that could shake things up a little bit come playoff time. But it's going to be interesting to see ultimately what sort of comes about, the performances, the confidence that these teams bring come playoff time, and the pushes some of them will make. But I don't feel like I have too high of expectations for the other 2 teams outside of Ragers in this group. Ragers did a really classy job really cleaning up this group, and the onus is on KGK, I believe, here to really step things up. They just were shy of the second seed in this group. It doesn't mean that they aren't a team to fear potentially come playoff time for some of the other teams in the middle in the mix-up, but let's see if it comes about. Let's see if it comes to fruition. But we got ourselves some more groups to still obviously cover, and our next group that we have on the cards to cover up is going to be that Group D. There have been a lot of groups. There were a lot of groups competing in the group stage of this competition here at NACAL. And well, with Group D, you got Voltage Gaming. I really don't think I need to say much. As soon as you hear the name Voltage Gaming in the group, you know that it's going to be a blockbuster show for them. And they actually went undefeated in both series and maps in this group. And, a few people looking at this one could maybe argue, these teams were really light. They were really light work. They were easy. They were simple. They were, they're small fries. And there's an argument that's made for that. And now it's, to me, the way that you see a response from an argument made by that is in the playoffs. Come playoff times, does Team KGK here, do they have what it takes to, once again, just like their sister team that was competing and made it out of their group in Group C, do they have what it takes to shock and awe? Do they have what it takes to be an underdog and take down a few Titans, unlike they were able to do in their own group? Alongside, Elations, who's another strong team, in the come-up stages of the amateur scene in this league. They're a stronger, bottom of the pack team. It's going to be interesting to see if they're able to step things up and bring out some more surprises. But ultimately, it was the Voltage show, and you see trades coming through in terms of wins and losses with Team KGK and Elation, and that sort of ended up being a really interesting dynamic that grew throughout this group. But ultimately, the one problematic thing for Elations was their loss they took against the Mafia Sicario side that spoiled their fun and put them in the third spot. So it's going to be interesting if Elations and Team KGK can meet again in playoffs, what sort of happens with all of that. But let's move on to your next group. It's going to be Group E that comes to you guys following this Group D deconstruction. Now, with Group E, we have Zelos, Fusion, and we have Oculus Performance. Those are your 3 teams making out of Group E. Now, let's take a look at how they were able to do it. So this group the teams here, unfortunately, were kind of lazy, in my opinion. They really didn't show much. We're seeing these 3-0 scores all across this group. We're seeing some draws as well. We're seeing losses that were 3-0s and wins that were 3-0s. And some of that, well, a majority of these draws and these wins and these losses, from my understanding, were actually forfeits from these teams being too active in other leagues, in other competitions. There was a LAN that went on in Texas, and some teams were there, and they couldn't play out their matches at the end in the last week. So it was just a complete and utter mess and chaos. But from my prior knowledge of these teams, I wouldn't put it past Zealous Squad to be able to bring out some fire, bring out some heat come playoff time. And even the side of Oculus Performance Black here, if they were to be able to string together some success, win some maps, win some series in the winners bracket, losers bracket, they can make some runs. I've seen it done before by these guys. And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not both of these two teams will continue to impress, or maybe Fusion Esports will be able to take the cake in terms of being the most impressive team come playoff time from this group. It's a real toss-up, guys. I can't stress it enough. But from my prior knowledge, as well as the placement coming out of this one with the head-to-head winning for Zealous GG, they have to be the strongest team in my eyes coming out of this group, statistically and obviously historically in my eyes as well. From what I've seen them do, what they've been able to put up numbers wise in other leagues and other competitions. Now, walking away from this group E and into group F, we're over the hump. I would say we're just about over the hump of 50% of the groups here that we've covered. And so let's jump into that group F coming up for you guys. And so with group F, it's a story that we've seen in the past already. With the groups, like group A and group C, where it's very one-sided, an undefeated team. They take very little losses, and Lockout Gaming, one of the top 4 teams coming out of the group stage for a good reason. In consideration, they only dropped 2 maps out of their entirety of 6 matches against the 3 other teams in their groups. Punk Esports, a team not to be pushed over. They are a relatively strong team. They have some good showings in the past on this game, and in past games, the organization is in the come up, and boy, are they a bit of a wild card. We're not cutting breaks here, but obviously we'll be cutting checks later on in the competition. Punk could be a team to maybe look to spoil a bit of fun for some of those other teams in the playoffs that would feel like they might coast through teams like them and underestimate them. While we look over at teams as well, big surprise, shocker, Biohazard Blood did not end up making it through from this group, and we do see IX Esports instead able to take the cake with the 1 win they got over them. Was able to be, they trade wins, but ultimately with the map win-loss records being the difference maker, it came down to the wire in whether or not which team here made it through. And now IX Esports they were cut a break here. They're given this special opportunity to get into playoffs and maybe stun. Will they be able to do so, or will they just be throwing some flashbangs out there instead of stuns and not really finding too much success, maybe blinding people for now, sort of like how I might be feeling a bit blinded with these glasses on. But for the most part, it's really just Punk and Lockout that we're looking at in this group, and Lockout Esports, Lockout Gaming. I'm excited to see them make a splash come playoff time against other top teams and to really feel more challenged. I feel like this Punk side challenged them well, but just that extra, give them an extra push, get a Zealous Gaming team in there, or maybe send them a Ragers Esports, another team that's undefeated coming out of group stage. So I'm excited to see them clash. I saw them play really strongly against Punk on my stream just a week ago. So it's going to be interesting to see if they're able to carry over the strong performance that I saw there. And, and their strong performances through the group stage over into playoff competition. Got high hopes. If you're a fan of them, you got high hopes, as well as obviously if you're me, somebody that witnessed what they could do. And so moving on, we have ourselves Group G. Group G has 410 Gaming in it, one of the favorites from last year, one of the strongest teams out of last year's competition here in NACAL, last season's competition in NACAL as well, I believe. No surprise, they come out on top in their group. They walk through their competition, dropping one map in total. They are the second strongest looking team coming out of groups, right behind Voltage, and for a good reason. Fan favorite, also just dominates through their group. Lurk, though, an interesting team, and same with Pirate Nation. Both of those teams, I feel like, have what it takes to shake up a few other teams. They look like they might not have unloaded enough of what they had in the tank in group stage. I don't know if it's due to the fact that they were a bit preoccupied with other things. Maybe it was them fainting a bit, but we'll see what ends up coming to fruition. It all comes down to whether or not the teams perform to high tide when it comes to playoffs, or if they get swept in and they expect a low tide when they get absolutely hammered by a high tide from another team. So Lurk, they are also an interesting underdog team to look for. They're not going to be, unfortunately, on the list. I don't remember putting them on that. Pirate as well, but I do have some good expectations for both of those teams to obviously make some waves and shake up a little bit of the competition. So we'll see what comes to fruition there. But that's Group G Group G in a nutshell is 410 taking charge and just absolutely dogging the 2 to 3 other teams there in that group. Arctic Knights not really looking like much here, dropping all their maps and taking draws against the Pirates. It's just I think it's crystal clear how these teams sort of finished out here. Just what these teams can bring to the table, and Pirates didn't even need to win a single game here to even get into the playoffs. That's how funny this is with this group, with Pirates Nation and the Arctic Knights just absolutely flubbing everything. But we'll see. I think Pirates do have a little bit of something in the back pocket. Getting ready, though, we have Group H, and we're on to the last 3 groups teams to cover. And so with Group H, we have ourselves Zelex, Indiana Syndicate, and 410 Nation coming out of the Group H group. And the one team not making it out of there is Pipeline Esports. Interesting enough, Pipeline, they get absolutely piped up by these teams. Pardon the obvious pun, but you got to throw it down when it's a team that gets just manhandled like this in groups. Only winning 4 maps out of their 6 matches, and one standout thing you got to give them a bit of props for. It has to be the 2-3. Has to be the 2-3 loss to Zelex Esports. So even though they were the 4th place team in this group, I gotta look and bring you guys back to Group B. Where we saw Dynasty's group. This one was sort of the same sort of picture. The teams really fought. It was super scrappy, and these first, second, and third seeded placements all came down to the wire within the last week. Is where we sort of found these teams sort of solidify where they would slot in coming out of this group. And so Zelex, they come out on top here, and they're going to be an interesting team to continue to watch and see if they will continue to find success coming out of groups and into playoffs, as they're going to be tested more heavily by some of the other teams coming out of some of the other groups. Same with Indiana, and then 410 Nation, to be the sister team of one of the favorites, one of the strongest teams in the league at the moment. It's got to be a lot of pressure, so it's going to be interesting to see if whether or not they are going to cave in from the pressure, maybe, or if they will be able to rise like Phoenixes from the ashes of a 3rd place finish in their group. They're given a second chance at life. Will they be able to use it, or will they squander it? Sometimes you only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. Opportunity comes once in a lifetime, but this time they're going to get a second one, and it's going to be playoffs where they get to try to show up and show out. But that is your nutshell explanation and cover up of Group H. Now let's see if we can jump into Group I action and break that down for you folks. As with Group I, came an interesting story of this Exalv team that I haven't really heard of before and didn't think much of, but after what they were able to put down and drop down in this group play, I'm absolutely all for it. Exalved, super strong. They won each and every matchup they had in the group stage. They dropped only 2 maps out of, all of 6 of their matches. Wonderful, wonderful record of 18-2. You can't really ask for much more. Obviously, perfection could be what you ask for from them, but they're still an undiscovered and underrated team, and I really think that they have what it takes to be a potential top 4 team in this entire league come playoff time. And Trevec, an interesting little team as well. They were going undefeated up until they met Evolved Esports for their first time in their group stage. So it's going to be an interesting battle when it comes to playoffs to see if Exalved can look good, if Trevec can turn things up a notch and get into a higher gear so that they can compete alongside Exalved more efficiently and put up better results there. And 0 Point Esports, also looking over at them, they've been floundering a bit. They were lucky to escape elimination in this group. They were able to just squeak out 1 win to get them through to the next round of competition, the playoffs. But you look over at Easy GG and they got a loss of a 2-3 to Exalved. They were the team to take 2 maps off of Exalved. Why weren't you guys able to just get 1 win off of 0 Point or 1 win off of Trevec to get you guys, or Trivec, to get you guys into that next stage, into playoffs? That's the big question that I have for that team. If they do come back for next season's competition, they got to show up a bit better here. But looking at this group, just the overarching picture here is just Exalved, just showing us how just dominant they are in competition and not to be taken lightly when it comes to playoffs now coming up next. And speaking of coming up next, we have our last group to cover here in the group stage breakdown, and it's going to be Group J here. And so for those of you guys that are new to Royal Gaming actually was Flow Elite Esports, I believe. So Flow Elite Esports, household name here at NACAL. They're a really strong LATAM team, I believe. And they show up time and time again, competing really well. And they recently changed branding, or at least this roster might have changed hands to another organization. And so they're going to be representing Royal Gaming. And, they still performed extremely well here against the Titans of Estrel & Co., who were representing Hyped Esports. So Hyped Esports, it's a team name, Estrel & Co., that is very well known. I'm familiar with them. They're a super strong amateur roster of young, hungry top AMs out in the challenger scene that, that hop from team to team or sort of fit themselves in with team to team. And they have a really nice tight-knit friends group that competes in these leagues. And so they're no slouch, but to have a close series of go the distance twice, you've got to give this Royal Gaming side a lot of props here. And so they're a really strong underdog here. And HOC, they're also coming out of this group here in the 3rd seed. They're looking to try to turn some heads come playoff time as well. And you're looking over at the Hyped Esports side, and they would have had a perfect week or a completely perfect group if it wasn't for the forfeit to HOC. So interesting enough, Hyped Esports, they're not coming in with a flawless record, but their play so far has been very, very strong, and they're definitely another team on the top of the blocks, the top 8 to keep a lookout for. It's going to be interesting to see if they can do so, if they can continue to dominate. Will they be able to dominate? That's another question to put forward for all of you folks to think about, as well as themselves. But for sure, they're a top team to just definitely look out for. And that's sort of like the tail of the tape here in this group, is really just how dominant you see the divide of the side of Hyped Esports and Royal Gaming from HOC Esports and Toxic Talents. It's the big divide right between there. Like, you got two teams that are on one level, and you got two teams that are on a completely different level. So HOC, not really expecting too much out of them. We should see a lot from the other two teams come playoff time, though. That wraps up the action here, being brought to you guys and broken down for you guys when it comes to group results. Thank you guys for checking in on that. We will be getting ourselves set up for the next one. It's going to be seeds that we cover in the next section of this video. Don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back. But if you guys are only checking the end of this clip here, and then you guys aren't going to tune in for the next section, well, thank you guys so much for tuning on in. It's been awesome breaking down the groups. Make sure you give the channel a like, give it a subscription if you guys would love to. That'd be awesome. And also check out my socials, for Trixel, everything. Twitch, Twitter, you guys know where it is. And if you guys are tuning in for the next video, it should be up next shortly. So we'll be jumping onto that.